Australian nationalism has had a lot of faces over the years. A lot of those characters have been respected, some of them have been vilified, some of them have been controversial, and some of them have been completely misunderstood. But whether you agreed with them or not, they all played a role in shaping the debate about what Australia is and what Australia should be in the future. You don't have to agree with everything you're about to hear in this interview. Gosh knows, I know it's going to be spicy for people. It's not the point to agree with all of it. The point is understanding how we got here. Because if you want to build the country you believe in, whatever that looks like, you first have to understand how we got here and the people that helped shape where we are, the moments and the mistakes that forged the road that we're currently on. Fraser Anning was one of those moments. And when he entered the Australian Senate in 2017, he ignited a debate that is still raging in this country today around immigration, identity, and the idea of nationalism in a modern Australia. To some, he was a warning, and to others, he was just early, but he was impossible to ignore. Businessman, family man, entrepreneur, a multi-generation Australian with deep roots in the country that he loves. And over the years, he's carried a lot of labels. He's been a patriot. He's been controversial. He was an Australian senator. And he's also been a persecuted political figure. Today, many people would describe him as a political refugee. But love him or hate him, Fraser Anning forced a national conversation that Australia is still having today. So rather than talking about him, today we're going to talk with him. This is Fraser Anning talking to me about where he's come from, where he is, and what the future of Australia could potentially, should look like, according to him. And let's not forget that Fraser doesn't live in Australia right now. He's been forced to live overseas in the USA because he literally cannot come back to Australia. I hope you enjoy this interview. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Former Australian Senator Fraser Anning, fantastic to catch up with you, mate.
Good to catch up with you, Scotty.
I can't believe you're living in the US these days.
Yeah, well, we're living the dream. You know, we obviously didn't want to be living in the US. I'm an Australian and fifth generation and would much rather have been living in Australia, but unfortunately circumstances made it so that I can't really live there.
Yeah, and I mean those circumstances, for anyone who's followed the story, for any nationalists out there that are probably familiar with it, there'd be people that wouldn't know though. There'd be a lot of younger guys that probably have no idea because they probably don't remember back before COVID, you know. But yeah. You left, I think you left Australia before COVID, was it 2019?
19, yeah.
Yeah. And you left because basically you stirred up a fair bit of controversy, yeah?
Well, I just said what I believed and I saw where Australia was going and where we're going wrong.
Yep.
More to the point. And, you know, I spoke out about communism, socialism, communism and Islam.
Yep.
And they're the two biggest threats to Australia. They're also the two biggest threats to this nation and pretty much any Western nation.
Yep.
And because of what I said, they were going to try and jail me for hate speech, you know, under Section 18C of the anti-discrimination law. I could have gone to jail for 5 years, and I didn't want to do that. My daughters and son-in-laws and my grandkids are all over here, and I didn't, you know, it wasn't going to do much good in jail in Australia. So I came over here.
Yeah, and you've been here ever since. Living your best life. It's a big country. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
It certainly has a lot more freedoms here that we don't have in Australia. And I will emphasise here that you carry every day, which I think is fantastic.
Well, both my wife and I carry,
yep.
As do most of the people in the community we live in.
Yep.
I don't know too many people who don't carry, and you can legally open carry, or you can have a CCW, which, you know, then you have it under your coat.
CCW,
concealed carry weapon.
Yeah, concealed carry weapon.
So you can, you know, so it's just a little bit more polite. If it's under your shirt, you're not out there like Wild Bill Hickok or someone like that.
Yeah.
But you have the right to carry any way you like. So it's what they call a constitutional carry state.
Do you miss Australia at all?
Well, you know, after, you know, we've been on, you know, cattle ranch, cattle stations, and we miss Australia. You know, we miss the beaches, we miss the food and stuff like that. I don't miss the fact that there are no freedoms there much anymore.
Yeah.
Where here, you know, I can say whatever I like to whoever I like, and I can't go to jail for that.
Yeah.
You know, we have, you know, First Amendment, Second. Well, we have a Constitution. Yeah. And the Constitution gives every American, everyone here, every right. You don't have to ask somebody for that right. Yeah. And so that their Constitution was incredibly well written.
You were lucky to have somewhere like this to go to, I guess, when they were, you know, and it was a very real threat back then that they were going to put you in jail.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. After that last election where all our votes were destroyed, pretty much 90% of my vote was destroyed, and we had that with people signed affidavits, and we even had one man in Western Australia who was running for my party, the Conservative National Party, with a big family, very well known, extremely well known, and Western Australia was very pro Conservative. At his polling booth, where he and his wife and everyone else voted, he didn't even get his own vote. They went a little bit too far. They destroyed all the votes instead of destroying 90% of them.
Was he running for Senate or lower house?
He was running for the lower house, I think. Yeah, lower houses.
And he didn't even have his own vote.
They didn't even give him his own vote.
How does that happen? I mean, I've scrutineered at elections and volunteered a lot over the last kind of 20 odd years, and it's hard to imagine that level of, you know, kind of interference could possibly happen. The affidavits we had from some of our scrutineers was at one polling booth, you know how the Senate vote is the big long white one. Yep. They had them all there and they're scrutineering, and came to 6 o'clock and said, okay, we're closing down. They said, well, what about the Senate votes? He said, oh, we'll do them later. Yeah. So the scrutineers are pushed out, and you know. Anyway, look, and people say, why didn't you say something? It's because, of course, the media says, oh, Anning couldn't take the umpire's decision. Yeah. So, you know, I thought. So you got elected to the Senate in 2017, and so you were a senator for 2 years. Then the next federal election rolled around in 2019. That was the election that Morrison won, I think, in 2019, wasn't it?
No, Morrison was in while I was there.
Sorry, he was already in.
Yeah, he censured me. You know, it was terribly painful. I said, what's he going to do? Come down and hit me with his lace hanky or something? And they didn't like that.
Mate, I remember when you got into the Senate, and it was like someone had like kicked the hornet's nest, right? Like from the day you got there, you were pretty much public enemy number one in the mainstream media, and all because you were what I would describe as a nationalist, as an Australian, as someone who believed in their country. You know? Yeah, but you can't. And you came from the bush. You go to somewhere like Canberra, which is this stinking woke bubble. It was a stinking woke bubble back then. It's worse now. And you must have been the odd man out in the room, mate, you know. Yeah,
it was. And unfortunately, a lot of the other, what we would hope were conservatives, didn't back me on a lot of the bills that I brought to Parliament, you know, like, for instance, or to the Senate, you know, giving the Australian people a say in who comes to their country. Who do you want as your neighbour? Do you want a South Sudanese family who are probably going to rob you and rape your daughter? Or, you know, would you want these people in your neighbourhood? And we had, the first 3 months I was there, they had a lot of talk over the plebiscite for the gay marriage. Yeah. Well, no one gave a rat's ass, to be quite honest. You know, I mean.
Well, Canberra's full of gay people.
Exactly, exactly. Well, Penny Wong hated me because I used to give her heaps. But, you know, they wanted to give the Australian people a say on gay marriage. Well, why not give the Australian people a say on who comes to their country? Yep. And of course, that's the last thing government wants to do, because they need to bolster their voting bloc. Yeah. And so they bring in all these, you know, radical Muslims and. You know, destroy the value of your homes in cities, in suburbs and stuff. So I thought Australian people really should have that say.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, one of the reasons we're talking is because the pendulum has swung, right? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you were early to the game, you know, built the beachhead really that a lot of this movement is starting to build from. And when I look, and people will try and do this revisionist history lesson, especially people on the left side of media, and try and label you. And you know, if we go back and talk about back then, but back then was important because it led to where we are now. And if COVID hadn't have gotten in the way, I reckon we would have had this conversation much sooner.
Yeah.
You know, but they used COVID for their own nefarious purposes. Then when they opened the borders, they opened the gates, you know, and they just imported millions of people. And the whole demographic of Australia has changed since then.
That's right. And our quality of life, well, we're losing our identity, you know, we're, you know, decent, you know, God-fearing people, hard-working people who have lots of fun, and that's all going now, you know. I mean, they're controlling even the fun part of it. You can't throw off at somebody, and you know, otherwise you could go for hate speech.
Yeah.
And it's up to the socialists and those sort of people who decide on what is hate speech.
Yeah, and look at, you know, offence is taken, not given, and that's the part about 18C that I've always really struggled with. Because what's your definition of offence, right? I mean, I grew up playing football and got called a white C every weekend, mate, with Aboriginal teams, right? It was just the banter, and it was the way I could have taken offence to that, you know, culturally inappropriate. But I mean, what they did was they implemented a whole bunch of laws and legislation, and more since then, that would probably definitely have got you in jail now, I reckon.
Yeah, and you really can't do anything from jail. You know, once you're in there, you know, they've silenced you, you know, and Pauline's got to watch out that they don't try and do that again to her.
Do you think they'd be able to get away with it?
Look, I really believe that about 70%, and I may be wrong, of Australians are Christian conservative patriots. White Australians I'm talking about. Real Australians are the ones who have been here and born there, and they unfortunately, we don't say enough. You know, I mean, we get pushed into being a sheep, being locked in your house during COVID and everything. I think, you know, there's got to be a catalyst that'll get them up and running. If Pauline was locked up, maybe that would be the catalyst, you know.
Yeah. Do you think that someone that migrates to Australia from South Sudan, for example, and we're, you know, a lot of people coming from the subcontinent now, can be Australians?
They can live in Australia, they're not Australians. No, and they should never have a vote in Australia. Australians should have a vote in Australia. That's it. You know, you can come in, you can get naturalised and all that sort of stuff, but really, you know, you're not Australian. So, and people say, well, they said to me early in the day, you know, oh, you bring back the White Australia policy. And I said, wasn't a bad policy, to be quite honest.
Well, it was designed to keep out cheap labour.
That's it.
Right? It was designed to protect workers and to make sure that they weren't undermined by ruthless employers. And in this instance, I'll call it the Business Council of Australia, bringing in imported labour to keep wages low. You know, and now we've got a cost of living crisis because wages aren't keeping up with the inflation crisis, driven by bringing more people in. You know,
and the people we brought in originally, the Greeks, the Italians, great settlers, worked hard, didn't go on a handout. The Vietnamese, you know, when they came over, they were good settlers. They helped build the nation, you know. But the stuff that's been coming in lately, you know, the vast majority of them a lot of them are on the handout. They're involved in crime way more than anywhere else. Well, in England, you know, and that's a different story, but
we're on the same trajectory there.
Yeah, Muslims make up about 4% of the population, yet they're responsible for 92% of the rapes.
Yeah.
So, you know, they come from a country where those sort of things are normal. You know, if you want your neighbour's thing, you hack him to pieces with a machete.
Yeah. That
doesn't really work in Australia. You take one of the most violent people on the planet and put them in with some of the most peaceful people on the planet, there's going to be a problem.
I feel like we're lambs to the slaughter with the way they've run immigration in Australia in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Just going back on the migrants that come over after the Second World War, because the other Friday night when we ran our event at the Port Office Hotel, there was a bunch of young people. It was centred around young people against mass immigration, and every young person I spoke to, when I say young, everyone, you know, kind of 20 to 25, I said to them, "What is an Australian?" You know, every single one of them struggled to answer that question now, because the education and the cultural programming that they've had makes it really hard to define that. If we go back and we have a look at what you define as an Australian, when you think about the guys that can't, the Italians and the Greeks and Europeans that settled in Australia, would they be considered Australians now?
I think they are, because they integrated generations ago. I mean, you know, we're a Scottish and Irish background, so, you know, I'm not sure, you know, English, Scottish, Irish, they're the first people who came over, and it's only 200 and something years ago. You know, they're Australians, so I just, the Italians and the Greeks particularly, they worked in the hydroelectric schemes and the cane fields and the, you know, shops and stuff like that. And they're Christian type people, so they had our values at heart, you know. I mean, a lot of them didn't want their daughter to marry an Australian, but, you know, now they're all part of the same group. So, you know, the
European Christians.
Yeah,
right.
That's right. White,
it shouldn't be a bad thing to consider.
No, nothing to apologise for. You know, now it seems that you know, we built a great nation. Our forefathers built this beautiful, you know, Australia, and these people come in and we find people apologising for that. You know, I mean, we're white Australians, and oh, geez, that's you nearly. I see people shrink when I talk to them about it, and they think, well, you can't say that. I even had one politician in Canberra told me, he said, oh, Fraser, you can't use the M word. I said, do you mean the N word? And he said, no, the M word. I said, you're saying Muslim. Yeah, you can't say that. I said, why can't I say it?
Yeah.
He had a heart about as big as my shirt button. I said, you know, they're quite happy to tell you what they want us to do, you know, and when they slaughter us and, you know, attack us and all these sort of things, death to Australians and death to the infidel, which is us, and I can't say the M word?
Yeah.
So anyway, that same person is now saying the M word quite a lot.
It's interesting to me because, you know, I'm a Christian. I believe that God created all men equally, but didn't create all cultures the same, mate. You know? And I'm incredibly proud, as are you, of our Australian culture. I think it's unique. It's specific to our time and destiny and our place in history. I don't want to see it disappear. You know, and I was talking to a Chinese kid of origin on Friday night, and he said, well, what's Australian culture? Going to the pub on Friday night. I said, no, mate. I said, Australian culture is high trust. It means that if I break down on the side of the road, there's a pretty good chance that someone like me is going to help me out. And it means if you're in trouble, that one of us guys will help you out. Or if you engage my building company to do a job for you, that you'll pay me when we do the work. And now we've become a low trust society, where you don't know who's going to help you out. You don't know if you're going to get rolled walking down that street. And I can do your building job for you, and I don't know if you're going to pay me. That's what we've become. So when I think about our Australian culture, for me, it's not just our accents and kangaroos and all the rest of that stuff. I mean, that's some symbolism, but our culture was defined by high trust and integrity and counting on your mates. And I think we've lost a lot of that.
And getting in and getting things done. You know, we're a can-do type of people. Whether you're on a, you know, cattle station or you're in the construction industry or whatever industry you happen to be in, you know, Australians always got in there, got it done. Yes, we party at the end of it on a Friday afternoon in the bar, why not? But we're all good mates, you know, and you're right, we've lost a lot of that. The trust is going, and that's because of, you know, some of the nationalities, and, you know, Indians aren't the most trustworthy people in the whole world. They come in there and they'll, you know, cheat you for your last dollar. I've dealt with the Chinese. I was selling aeroplanes to them. And you know, you're very lucky if you get paid at times, you know, so that's not Australians. Normally a handshake was good enough. Of course, we don't, you know, we have a contract, but, you know, if the guy said he's going to do it, that's what he's going to do. Yeah,
100%. And it's funny because 17 years ago, when I started the building company, the terms and conditions on our building contracts were 4 pages. Now it's probably closer to 15. You know, because progressively, as each year's gone on,
every loophole,
we've had everyone, you know, try to find ways to not pay you or to litigate against you, that you've got to tighten things up. And that's what I mean about the low trust versus high trust, right? You come from the bush.
your word's your word, right? Like when you say you're going to do something, if you didn't do it, like that's, your reputation's shot.
You've
right?
lost, you lose your name, you've lost everything.
Yeah.
But when I was selling those aeroplanes to some of them, and we'd sign the contract and do everything, yes, okay, we'll build these 5 aircraft for you, whatever, and then sign off on it, that's when they start to negotiate. I said, hang on, you must put in a transponder and do this. I said, the deal was done here.
Yep.
And they believe that's, oh, well, then you're a week late with this, so we want to change the contract. So in the end, I'd say if you want more aeroplanes, General, Shallowchal, you send us the money for the 10 aeroplanes and we'll start cutting steel. Oh no, I'll pay the progressive payments. So I said, well, history tells me you don't pay the progressive payments. So you send me the money, and when the cheque is cleared in our account, we'll build those aeroplanes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was then, and they were just little aeroplanes that we built in Australia, which are great little machines, but they were.
Yeah. You it's not easy to get elected, right? You got elected as a senator, and you got in there by surprise. If you don't mind me stepping back to this a bit, because Malcolm Roberts was removed because of his dual citizenship stuff, and so suddenly you found yourself one day you're doing business, the next minute, hey Fraser, we need you to come to Canberra and be a senator.
Yeah.
What did that feel like?
That was different. I mean, initially Pauline asked me to run second on her ticket. And I said, no, I'm going to America. My family's in America, and we're moving to America.
Oh, so that was your plan back then?
Yeah. And so then she came back a month later and said, I have somebody to run second, which was Malcolm Roberts. Will you run third? And I said, look, Pauline, I don't think you get 2 in, let alone 3. So I put my name down, and the rest's history. Roberts wasn't an Australian citizen. He got put out, and that's how I got into the Senate. So I never aspired to be a politician, but I thought, well, maybe I can do some good here and work hard, and I was on my feet every day in that Senate.
Yep.
I did meet a couple of guys, one who'd been there, Labor man, one 16 years, one 18 years. They had never brought a motion, a bill or an amendment. They'd never stood on their feet. The only thing they ever did was go from this side at a vote to this side. That was their whole life, and they happily take the money for it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of term limits.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, term limits, and for bureaucrats as well. I don't think just for politicians. I think for the bureaucracy should rotate. Yeah.
And I will say about 80% of the bureaucracy is unnecessary.
Well, there was a interview that John Anderson did with a former New South Wales Treasury economist last week. It was a great interview, saying the public service, federal public service, has increased by 54% in the last couple of years. Yep. There's 1.2 million public servants in Australia, and 80% of them are administrative roles. Mm-hmm. So I'm in an industry that is literally gridlocked with bureaucracy.
Right. And
everywhere. You came from hotels and licensing, right?
Exactly. And they'll more and more red tape, more and more compliance issues. You have to have these books, the fire thing and this, and no one's ever read any of them, but if I get caught without them, they can shut you down. I mean, one bureaucracy, the fishery just for instance, and they decided to start a fisheries department. 200 years the fishermen have been father to son, generation after generation, doing fishing and looking after their fish stocks. They don't rape it and kill it. They're doing well, but the fishery department, they said, the news headlines, we think the fish stocks are being depleted. So they set up the department. So then they went to the fishermen. They said, okay, instead of January to December, you can only fish from January to June.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the next year the catch was half, and the headlines were, yes, we were right. The fishing catch is half as much.
Yeah.
So now we'll cut your area in half, and so now it's a quarter. Yeah. And eventually these poor guys go out of business.
Couldn't make a living.
And I had them in my office, and one grown man, decent guy from Mooloolaba, he was nearly in tears. He said, I'm 4th generation fisherman. I'm losing my boats. I've lost my business, my family. It was a terrible thing. Meanwhile, the super trawlers are out there raping our fishery from, Vietnam and Taiwan and China and wherever else.
And the Philippines, and then selling it back to us.
Yeah, well, they actually, if you want really good Australian fish, you go to Dubai or you go to, New York or some. And meanwhile, they're selling the Australian housewife bassa, which comes from the Mekong Delta. And it comes out yellow brown, so then they dip it in bleach and it comes out white, and the Australian housewife thinks she's buying nice white meat. Well, it's filth. Anyway, so so those departments need, the Department of Lands. They're telling graziers, fifth generation graziers, what tree they can cut down and what water their cattle can drink at. A 25-year-old kid in Canberra, probably, who's never been outside of
You've got a science degree.
Exactly. So those departments, I would dissolve a lot of them, abolish a lot of them, never to be re-employed by a government agency ever.
I think after COVID, we all worked out that you can't trust much of what comes out of government these days. And I've said this a few times now, is that nothing seems to function through government departments anymore anyway. So what's the point? We need to have a reset. I just wanted to go back and talk about your election. When you were a senator, it's not easy to get elected. It takes time, takes effort, takes a community to help you, and all this type of stuff as well. Mm-hmm. Do you think you were reflective and representative of your community, the people that you knew, that got you in there, that voted for you?
I do. I'll tell you the reasons. I've worked in the cattle industry, the hospitality industry, the aircraft industry, and the construction industry, and all those people, whether it's cowboy boots or hard hats or high vis, particularly the hotels. We had, my wife and I have had 29 hotels we either owned or ran. I had pub rescue, so I'd get hotels out of trouble. And I talk to those guys every day of my life, and I know exactly what they believe. Really, I had a really good understanding of what they believed, and they're the hard-working Australians, the real Australians, and they didn't want mass immigration. They don't want socialism. They're happy to go to work and earn the money, so long as at the end of the day they can feed the family and pay the mortgage and actually own a house, and that's getting harder and harder. But they're the real Australian people, and it's just sad to see that. All their hopes and dreams are being taken away by filthy communists, and people say, socialism. Well, Lenin himself said between a free country and a communist country there's this stepping stone called socialism. That's what attracts the people who don't have enough intellect to do the research, and of course it always ends up as a communist country. So they didn't want any of those sort of things, and I think I did represent those people, and I got a lot of support for it.
You how old were you when you were elected, if you don't mind me asking?
6 years, about 69.
69. So a lifetime of working. All those pubs, all those industries that you'd been in, and you go in there with a lifetime of knowledge on how to run businesses, how to have difficult conversations, how to deal with dickheads, how to win at things as well, right? Because you don't get to that age in life without knowing how to make something work. And then you go down to Canberra, you know what has to happen. You get down there, you just hit brick walls, right? The bubble.
It was hard. It was hard. Well, you have the Labor, which is your socialists, and your Greens, which are your communists. They were the Communist Party, by the way, before they changed their name to Green. They realised they might get some idiots who think that they're tree huggers and stuff like that. But
the environmental stuff's gone. Mate.
Yeah, they're
all social now.
Straight communists. And then we had the Liberals, and they asked me. I went with Turnbull, wanted me to come in after I got in there and have lunch with him, and he tried to talk me into joining him. I said, do you realise that the only reason I'm here is because of your party and their party? Because you're not doing what Australians want you to do. And he was a bit miffed about that. So, but yeah, it's the people in that place. A lot of them are there for the long run, and whatever it takes for me to get back in there or them to get back in there, they'll do it. They'll sell their soul to the devil.
No, I'm not saying that's all of them, right? But there's a chunk of people in there that have never done anything in their lives, that have never been successful at anything. You go in at the age that you went in there, which is hard to believe because you look so bloody healthy now.
Oh, thanks,
right?
mate.
and you know already how to live, right? There's people in there that don't know how to live and have never made a dollar outside of politics in their whole lives.
You're right.
So for them, that's it. And I guess when we're seeing this shift now happening in Australia, we're seeing left-leaning politicians from the ALP starting to talk about, we need to reclaim Australia Day for nationalism, because they can see the writing on the wall. They can see what's coming.
Yeah, you're right. The wokeness, I think, it's nearly run its course. It has here in America.
Is that because they ran out of money?
I don't know. I think Trump has, been a great influence. Like the DEI, hiring somebody for DEI. I mean, a pilot, a black lesbian, doesn't mean she's going to be a good pilot.
No.
I'm not saying she's not going to be a good pilot. There's pretty fair chance.
Thinking about Susan Ley as the opposition leader in Australia, mate. I'm sure she's a lovely lady, right? But
well, if you're not a black lesbian, again, you will not get a job as a mayor or a chief of police or a DA. That basically that's your go-to DA. Well, let's find and the hair starts. And there's some very 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 good and successful ones, but don't just hire them because they're the right colour and they've got the right sexual orientation.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. That's what they were doing. They've all been fired now from the army.
yeah, Pete Hegseth did a great job. Right?
He's a great guy.
I think he said, "We're not doing that shit anymore."
if you're a boy dressing as a girl, you're out. And so all these admirals and different ones who got.
I like the name change too. The Department of War.
Yeah, exactly. He's not
let's not mess around. We know what we're here to do, and when called upon to do it, we're going to execute that.
And they're doing it very well right now. They're giving Iran the touch up that they deserve for many, many years.
There seems to be, and I'll segue a little here, there seems to be two trains of thought with the Iran thing from the Americans I've spoken to so far. There's Americans that are like, hard no, don't care, don't want a bar of it. Actually, three trains of thought. Don't know, don't care. I really think that it's not their problem at all. And the other thought is just get in there and get it done so that it doesn't become a problem continuing going forward. Because everyone's sick of hearing the threats about nuclear weapons for 30 years,
Yeah, and there's a fair bit of strategy that Mr. Trump's got there. I mean, the reason for Venezuela and Iran is not necessarily just to get rid of the despot, which is a great thing, who are murdering their own people and sponsoring all the terrorist attacks all over the world. It was about the oil too, because China and Russia both depend a lot on Venezuelan and Iranian oil. America now controls that, and they will continue to control that, and that's why the big fleet in the Straits of Hormuz and stuff like that to make sure that oil goes where we want it to go now, or where Trump wants it to go, not where China and Russia want it to go.
Australia has a petroleum reserve of 20 days. Back home, we're an energy superpower. We export almost more liquid natural gas than any other country on the planet. Bulk loads of coal. We have oil reserves, but we don't touch them. We can't even get a gold mine approved back home now. I was just in Dallas, and they're literally building a whole city there, spending $500 billion to build a brand new city. They're not messing around, mate.
For the oil, yeah.
Oh
yeah.
They're just going.
Drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill. Worked out the fuel's $1 a litre comparative to back home.
Yeah. Well, we were down to $2.95 the other day for gas for gallon here, which is 4.5 litres, I think it is. But it's gone up a little bit now because of the war over there.
Yeah.
So it's gone up to $3.30 a gallon or something. So, but yeah, you can.
It was still $2.55 in Texas yesterday.
You can travel a bit, and people.
That's why these people are driving like we would call them $150,000 utes back home. They're probably only half that price here.
Yeah.
But, I'm listening to these things rumble up the road, thinking, how do you afford the fuel? And then I realise how much they're paying for it.
I drive a Dodge Ram.
I'm sure you do.
And an F-150 I had, but the Ram, I love the Ram. It's a great truck.
Yeah.
It's got everything on it, and plus, it can carry a big load and pull a big trailer if I need to, and they cost nothing.
One of the things that they've done back home is try to wreck our culture, right? To try and make us feel bad about what we are. And every time I see a young bloke driving a raised four-wheel drive at home now with his P plates on, and it's loud and it's got an Aussie flag hanging off it, I literally have this burst of pride inside of me now. It's like, I want to see more of you around, mate, because I know it offends people.
Yeah. Oh, well, it'll offend you bleeding heart, bedwetting liberals, that's for sure.
What about the kangaroos?
Yeah.
What about the traffic, the pedestrians,
Like the pedestrians.
I look at these young guys now, and they've got to spend 100-odd hours trying to get a driver's license with lessons and stuff. You know, when I come through, and you probably come through as well, we just went to the local copper at the nearest regional town, and we went and did our license at 17, and we were done and dusted.
Printed it out.
Now these kids, I can't put kids on apprenticeships because they haven't got driver's licenses because they can't get through the system. You know.
Make everything as difficult. Well, you know, you've read Karl Marx, you know, and like destroy everything, destroy the economy, destroy everyone's life, and then rebuild it in the state. You know, let the state look after you.
Yeah. And
that's their whole go. I mean, that's all. Albanese is a straight Marxist, you know, and as are a lot of the bloody reporters. I used to love it. They'd say to me, I'm interviewing the far right-wing extremist Senator Fraser Anning, and I'd say, okay, so do you mind if I have my go? I said, well, now I'm going to be interviewed by a card-carrying Marxist who's masquerading as a legitimate journalist. And there's just outrage. I said, well, if you can categorise me and you can put me in that little box, the people who are listening to your show should know what you are, you know, because all you do is give them their opinion first. You know, like here's Anning, he's a right-wing extremist, so now you can all hate him, and we'll interview him, you know. So, but I didn't mind doing interviews over there, because they're not all that bright.
No, you were trumping them a lot of the times, right? Like you were our Australian version. You know, it was pretty cool to watch.
Well, you do the same. I watched your interview the other night, and that was excellent. The Friday night one with the Chinese-Japanese guy.
Kenji.
Yeah, Kenji.
Kenji threw some curveballs in there. Next time they'll send someone a little better.
Yeah,
they'll progressively keep upping the guns until they try and find someone who can try and counter you.
And catch you out, which is what they're there for.
Well, and you know, you've got to be careful about how you respond. But I think that as we go along too, we get better at the message.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, that was one of the reasons for catching up with you today, was to learn what you saw and what happened to you, so that we don't end up in the same bind, mate. You know.
Yeah, well, they started off on me early, you know, with the cameras in your face, the maiden speech, and the whatever, I can't remember. Oh, the final solution to the immigration problem is to let the Australian people have a say. They forgot all the last bit, just the final solution.
Yeah.
Hitler's final solution. I said, well, Hitler didn't speak English, mate. So you know, that's bullshit.
The German translation wasn't quite that. I don't think he ever said it, actually. I'm not told that by someone.
No, it was made up after the whole thing, you know. But
a lot of things get made up after the fact, don't they?
Yeah. And anyway, so I had a friend who was the head of the Australian Jewish community, and he called me the next morning. He said, don't worry about it, mate. We know it wasn't anything to do with us and all that sort of stuff. Because I stopped that bloody, what was her name? Julie Bishop from she was sending Australian dollars to the Palestinian Authority. Now, the Palestinian Authority used that money for pay to slay. So if you're a mad Palestinian, you want to make some money, you go across into Israel and blow up a busload of kids, and you go to jail. You get paid about 2.5 times a normal professor's wage per year while you're in jail, but all your wives get $80 each a month, and your children get $50 each. So it's like winning the lotto.
That's crazy.
And so they were doing it for not ideological reasons, but economic reasons, and they were going over there.
Who are going to sacrifice so the family can eat?
Yeah, and so here's Australian dollars doing it. So I was bringing a bill to the Senate to stop it, and Julie called me that night and said, Fraser, don't put the bill up. I said, well, I am. And she's, no, I'll stop the payments. I said, well, you show me some proof that you are, and which she did.
And she did. She shut it down.
Yeah, and it was only like 100, not even that, 80 or 90 million a year we were sending to the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, but for that place, that was a ton of cash, mate.
Oh, God, yeah. And she said, they're using it for education. I said, I know what they're using it for.
Did she really believe that?
Well, she was told to do it by the UN. The UN have been trying to control Australia and every other country for years. Yeah. We should have been out of the UN years ago. It's an absolute waste of time.
You must be loving what Trump's doing with it then, getting out of the WHO and the UN.
Yeah, and the China Accord and all these bloody, the Paris Accord, I should say. But, and I brought that bill to the Senate too, why are we in the UN? 54% of them are despotic dictators or Muslim countries that are represented there. and they're telling us what we should do with our money. Please, you send money to this third world country and this one, and meanwhile we're telling you who to bring into the country.
Yep.
Well, I don't think Australians need somebody like the UN to tell us, especially since they're all grubs anyway.
Yeah.
And so we should never have been in the bloody place. And,
I guess this is why we're meeting our international treaty obligations with our immigration program, I imagine.
Yeah, that's just what we need, isn't it?
Yeah. There was a bit of a moment where an Australian National University academic, Jill Shepherd, came out and admitted that big corporate money is basically keeping the immigration Ponzi scheme going in Australia, because it's good for Australia, even though the majority of Australians want to cut immigration. So we've started to see the elites, the mask come down now, where they're being exposed for what they are. And you saw that early. You guys were aware of it early. You said to me before that about 70% of Australians probably agree that we need to have a conversation about what what Australia looks like going forward.
Yep.
You're optimistic that we can get there now, you think?
I really hope so. I think you're right. The pendulum is swinging back to the right. Not only in Australia, but look at Italy and Argentina and Holland and places like that who are putting in decent, people who love their country and don't love, the Islamic immigration. And Islamic immigration is the biggest problem. I know in Indians as well, they're overpopulating us as well, but the Islamists are the ones who are. You're going to have three choices with Islam when they eventually get control. You can convert, you can be slaughtered, or you can pay dimitude. In other words, you can work for them, because you'll be paying a tax because you're not a Muslim. And they do keep those people alive because somebody has to do the work.
Yeah.
The Muslim believes in inshallah, it's in Allah's hands, and I don't have to work. Let the bloody whites and the infidels work, and we can have a good life and keep breeding heaps of kids. I think it's the world is seeing that this isn't working. And, we've had 9 crusades. I really believe we need the 10th crusade. Seriously do.
You think we take the Holy Land back?
I think that if we don't have
Call
a 10th...
it New Jerusalem?
Yeah, that's it. If we don't have a 10th crusade, we are going to live under Sharia law in Australia and America. Right now in Minnesota and in Texas and places like this, they're setting up, they're doing 100 mosques a year they're putting up. A mosque, by the way, is once a mosque goes in, they believe is they've claimed the land around that mosque. That is their land now. And they'll prove that to you by, buying all your, taking over your houses, and of course the price of houses go down so they can afford them and we can't. Yeah. And your lifestyle goes down, you can't go out, the women can't go out in the street by themselves and all that sort of stuff. You've seen the crime and everything in these places. So yeah, I think the right wing have to take up the cudgel, and we need another another crusade. One of my favourite people is Vlad from Romania.
Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad the Impaler. He got him out of Europe. He single-handedly did a huge job. He had them stuck up on posts. Sharp sticks. And in his
He wasn't
words,
messing around, was he?
No.
Yeah.
His words were...
Bad rap, that guy.
You can never kill too many Muslims, and I can agree. Because they want to kill me, and I'm happy to fight back. So.
When the Ayatollah got killed, I think it was yesterday.
Yeah, Saturday.
We had members of the Iranian community coming out in Sydney there, weeping and hollering and distraught for the death of the Ayatollah. And I think it was John Ruddock, one of the libertarians. I think it was a libertarian. I think it was John Ruddock. I hope I quoted this correctly. Came out and said, "Well, if these guys were genuine refugees that fled Iran, why did they upset in our streets about this? So why are these people here?
Yeah. Why did you get out of there if it's such a great place?"
Yeah.
And Islam is not a religion. People think it is. It's not. It's an ideology of hate. Always has been. Muhammad in 613 decided he wanted to form a gang. And so he thought he'd get Jews and Christians, so he's illiterate. He had to get people to put the Torah and the Bible together to try and attract them. And they didn't take too much notice of him in Mecca, so he went to Medina. In Medina, he did start to get followers. They took him in, they entertained him, the Jews and the Christians.
We could probably sell a pretty good story by then, I imagine. He had plenty of practice.
Then he started killing them. He started attacking their caravans, bringing goods into and then he was smart enough to, distribute it amongst his men. Well, they told other people, say, hey, join this gang, they call it Islam, and we'll kill some more infidels and steal their money. And that's how the whole thing got started. So it's nothing to do with the religion. It's a political ideology, and it always has been.
Yeah. You think it's not compatible with Australian culture?
Never will be. And since 640 AD, 640, it's never been compatible. 300 million people that they know of have been murdered by Muslims. So, and they're murdering them on a daily basis in East Africa right now, West Africa right now. They'll kill hundreds. I got interviewed about the Christchurch massacre where they misrepresented me.
100%. They dropped you right in on that one.
Yeah, and I said, well, what channel are you from? And he said, Channel 9. And I said, this last week, 640 Christians have been killed in the Philippines, 204 in a church, slaughtered, men, women and children, all their heads cut off, and 640, in worldwide this week. So I didn't see your report on that. Did you report that? He said, he didn't know what to say. No, have no idea. I said, no, because everyone expects that's what Muslims do. They persecute Jews and Christians, infidels. But 50 of them get shot in the mosque, and headlines everywhere. It was a terrible, sad story.
It was bloody terrible, all right.
Yeah.
I think Christchurch was terrible. It's always terrible when people die. And the media spun that into a story of their own and then kind of tried to implicate you into it as well.
Yeah.
But they also had the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who was literally, in my opinion, trained for this moment, who milked it for every second she could, and the virtue signalled the whole thing, and then guilt tripped the whole country into handing over their guns, right?
Yeah, the teeth in the hijab, that's what it looked like to me. She put a hijab on.
Teeth.
She's got the biggest teeth. I mean, she fell out of the ugly tree and hit every branch, poor bastard, but and then she had even the police women. She wanted the niqabs on the police women and all this sort of stuff. She was, such a bleeding heart, poor bugger. But and a good reason to disarm people. Yeah. But there's no communist country on the planet that hasn't disarmed its people first, because they know for sure that the people are going to eventually say, "Hey, we don't like this," and revolt. And of course, they don't want to be shot at, so a disarmed population is an easy population to control. Yeah.
What did you, when you woke up over here and saw the news about Bondi, how did you feel that day?
Yeah, I was, what a disaster. And that's when my daughter said, "Dad, you have to start posting about this, post something about it." So that's when because for 6 years I hadn't got onto social media at all. I'd look at it, but I never posted anything because I thought, well, I'm irrelevant over here anyway. But anyway, so I did, and it was a shocking thing. There's innocent women and children, men, women and children, who can't defend themselves being shot at by a pair of filthy, bloody Muslims. Yeah. So that was and it was thanks to the government that, one, brought them in, and two, made sure you couldn't protect yourself. I think it's every human's right. It's a God-given right to be able to protect your wife, your children, and your family. That's and that's our job in life.
In public or at home.
Anywhere. It's your job, and I know you would and you do. But if somebody's got a gun and he's shooting, it's very hard to say, well, I've got to protect my family.
Even the cops were outgunned that day.
Yeah.
And the level of training from the police, like you could tell. I mean, credit to the coppers for stepping into the breach when a lot of them weren't trained for it properly, didn't have body armour, and didn't have the right weaponry to deal with it as well.
And they can't shoot the damn poor bastards.
Well, I mean, it was a couple of cops with long shots, especially from handguns.
Yeah, well, no, that's right. That one detective, I think he got
had a resting spot on the tree and
good shot in.
build his position and get the shot in.
Yeah.
But still, it's that that was a fluke.
Yeah.
At that distance.
Oh, you're very lucky. Yeah. You know, over 75 yards with a handgun, that's a fairly long way out there.
Yeah, and so, Bondi happens, and what does Australia do? We swing into action, a knee-jerk reaction, and then start punching through legislation to lock down our own citizens.
Take more guns away and stop people from complaining about the people that have been brought in, yeah.
Yep, and then by default, get rid of any potential political opposition. And then drag the neo-Nazis into it as well at the top of your hate list. I didn't see any neo-Nazis pulling the trigger at Bondi. No,
that's right. No radical right-wing extremists. No. The funny thing is that the conservative side aren't the aggressors. Normally, here in America, every single school shooting, mass shooting, it's all liberals. Not only liberals, but a lot of trans.
Yep.
I think 7 out of the last 10 shootings were transvestites.
Well, they're on massive amounts of medication.
Exactly.
They're not well.
No, I know. Yeah. That's right. I mean, well, there's two genders and there's multiple psychological disorders.
Yeah, there sure is, absolutely. Yeah. But Bondi happens, Australia flinches, we get a raft of new laws and legislation over the Christmas period, when Australians traditionally aren't watching this thing close enough. And then you get a whole bunch of conservative politicians from the Liberal Party that lean into it and go, well, we had a win because we got some amendments in there to try and make it better than it was. What do you think about that? Do you think that was the right move?
No, the Liberals are traitors to what they're supposed to be. One time we had a Conservative Party and a left-wing and a right-wing party. They're so they're so close together now. It's not funny, and it's expedient on the Liberals' part. Look, we'll let them get this, but we'll get this, and I'm a hero because I made this amendment, and it should have been nothing to do with that. I brought a bill to the Senate one time that women should have the right to have handheld taser or a can of mace, and the left said, oh, how dare you, more weapons are not going to make Australia safe. And I said, look, these are not weapons. If you have a shield and a sword, this is a weapon and this is defensive. So a can of mace and a handheld taser, they're defensive.
They're not offensive.
I said, because we have, because I was in hotels and some of the bar girls and guys would leave, but particularly the girls, the most vulnerable, at 2 a.m. to get in their car. They were very vulnerable. Nurses leave at 2 and 3 in the morning in the black to go to their car, so they're perfect targets for some of these grubs. So they should have the right to be able to at least protect themselves, and that was held down. And that, by the way, I didn't get enough of the Conservatives on my side to get that vote through. Quite a lot of them they're Conservative in name only, and when the hard questions are there, like give the Australian people a vote on who comes to this country, they hide in their offices. They're not there. So when we eyes to the left, nose to the right, there and the others are in their shells. So
it always surprise you the amount of bipartisan support in Parliament. The way these guys would agree on pretty much 99% of everything anyway.
It was depressing to see that. Yep. But a lot of them, like you were talking about, career politicians. That's what they've done. That's what they want to do for the rest of their life. They don't want to, they're worried that they're going to lose that $250,000 a year and the cushy job and the first class seat in the aeroplane and all that sort of stuff. It's a nice life. I got to tell you, it's nice when a car comes and picks you up and takes you, Comcar they call it, and they take you to a restaurant and then they're back there to pick you up again. Yeah. And so I won't say I didn't like it.
I've got to ask, did you get access to the chairman's lounge with
Yes,
Qantas?
I did.
Yeah, right.
Yes, but that dreadful little homosexual bloody
Alan Joyce,
he threw me out of there. I can't remember what I got barred for.
He banned you from the Chairman's Club.
Yeah.
Chairman's Lounge.
Yeah, Chairman.
It was over the Muslim.
Oh, it was over the Muslim thing, that's right. Yeah, and But I kept going back there, and I knew all the girls there.
They just come on in.
Yeah, right. Keep going. But I got barred for that.
There's an argument that's being made right now that if Australia cut immigration, right, if we just shut the gates completely, which is what we're advocating for pretty much, that Australia would slide into a recession, that economically we'd be buggered. I don't think it'd be as bad as everyone makes out, but do you think Australians would be prepared to swallow the bitter pill?
It wouldn't be that bitter, because a lot of that economy is based on a fallacy anyway. You know, I'll give you $3,000 a week and you can go and buy a washing machine. Well, who made the $3,000? The Australian working man. That's where they're saying it's a false economy. It's built on a bubble, you know, and you know, these people, like, you know, you get 1,000 South Sudanese, they're not employable. One, they don't want to be employed because they believe that, you know, Allah's got to look after them. Then they get, you know, good housing, you know, plenty of money given to them by the Australian taxpayer, and they buy things. So the economy looks like it's going well, you know, the retail economy is going well. It's not. You know, I mean, the Australian, the guy who, you know, the construction worker next door to the Muslim could have walked over and just given him the money to buy it, because that's exactly what, it goes through the government, but so it's not, it's a false economy. So look, if they were all out of there, would Australia die? I mean, no,
we wouldn't die.
If they were, we'd be happy, we'd be healthy, we'd be producing like we always did. You know, the Lima Agreement killed our manufacturing. Get our manufacturing going again. Yep. You know, Australia doesn't need anyone. You know, we don't need the Chinese to own all our gas lines and our dairy farms and our ports. We don't need.
Now they're owning all the electrical infrastructure by with green energy tech that they produce. That they bring into our nation. I don't see how that isn't a massive sovereign risk. You know,
it is.
The shit it's a fan with China, mate.
I know.
What happens if they switch everything off? And you can't tell me they won't do that remotely.
They can. And the Belt and Road, you know, they've bought up all the islands around the Solomons and all these places. They go in there and say, you need some money, here's $1 billion, let us use your ports. So we're vulnerable there. We're lucky we have a very good ally, you know, in Trump, and he's going to control those people a fair bit more than they have been controlled. But Australia standing alone by itself, white Australia, the way we were, European type Australians, we don't need anyone else. We have, you know, we can have the best agriculture, fishing, water. We've got everything we need for Australians. Now, we don't want to be isolationist either, but we don't need to be being controlled by hostile nations like China. You know, and importing these people is just manufacturing an economy that's not really there.
Every day, 1,500 new migrants are moving to Australia. It's an MCG every quarter right now. And I know that they say they're cutting immigration numbers, the net overseas migration number, the NOM number. But what they're actually doing is pumping it up in other visa areas as well. And the whole visa system is so complicated now that you can't just look at one specific visa because there's so much of it, so many of it. The other thing is New Zealand being used as a backdoor for people to go through New Zealand and then get entry to Australia as well.
Yeah, they've been using that for a long time, yeah.
And so people said to me the other night after the Friday night thing, oh, you don't want to let New Zealanders move here and become citizens. If we did a deal with New Zealand where they became part of the Federation, that'd be a different conversation.
Sure.
But right now, it's got to be about Australia first. It's got to be about us first. It's got to be about our citizens first.
Yeah. And you're right. And so far, it's been we've been put last.
Yeah.
That's what, you know, Donald Trump got elected on. Make America great again. Americans first.
Yeah.
If it's not good for America, it's not good. And Americans, it's not good for Australians. It's not good. And really, how much good has the average Australian seen come out of having literally millions of people who will never integrate, who virtually hate you because you're an infidel, or, you know, I haven't seen anything good come out of it. And I don't think we will see anything good come out of it.
Hard to put the toothpaste back into the tube. Australia's got citizens there now that have been created. First things first, we're advocating for to shut the gates. You agree with that one?
Yeah, shut the gate.
Shut the gates.
And open the exit gate and shut the entry gate.
You can create incentives to leave.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. They have here. If you self-deport, you know, if you're a grub who doesn't like America and you burn the American flag and you want to self-deport before we throw you out, we'll give you $3,000 and put you on a jet. And
It's cheaper than keeping them here.
Oh, yeah, way cheaper.
One of the things about immigration in America, though, and I'll just to quickly touch on this, is that the amount of illegals that have come here have driven down wages here as well. Right. So, you know, I was talking to a lady in Texas yesterday that was working at the place I sat down and had dinner, had great brisket in Texas, right?
Yeah.
And her base wage was like $5 an hour.
Yeah.
You know, she's living on tips. But I was thinking about it afterwards, and she said she makes twice as much on tips as she does on her base. So,
at least,
you know, like
10 times.
sometimes she can have nights where she makes quite a few $100 because you know, people come in drinking and they have a good time and tip heavy. But I also realise it's an entry-level job too, that pretty much anyone can do is serve brisket.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not meant to make you rich, right? It's meant to be a stepping stone to something else.
Sure, and their systems, I think it's good. It's a reward for. I worked as a bartender here when I was a kid with my wife. We're 25 and we hadn't been married long, and we were over here working as a bartender, and I never had so much money. We were bringing home $300 or $400 a night.
People just wanted to hear your Australian accent.
They might have.
I bet you're a good-looking rooster back then too, I'll bet.
And a good line of bullshit. But my wife, Fiona, was making just much more than that. I was a bartender, so men don't make as much as the girls. But we had a great life, and so the system was good. But if you don't give good service, you don't give good tips.
That's right.
So the incentive is for you to be to be good at your job, which I think is not a bad idea.
It creates an entrepreneurial spirit. I know America's a very transactional society. Have you settled in well here? Do you feel at home here?
Oh yeah, we love it. I love it. I mean, it's not Australia, and I miss the beaches and my mates and good times in the bars and things like that. They don't have a great sense of humour. You know, a lot of the things you say go straight over their head. But you know, when you can buy a brand new F truck or something for $35,000, and it costs you nothing.
Cheap finance deals on it too.
Yeah, and a bottle of booze, 750 ml for $12 that costs you 90 or 80 in Australia, and the cost of living is better here. And your freedoms. The big thing is in Australia, gradualism, as Marx said. You just take one thing away at a time, one freedom away, and eventually you wake up and you've got no freedom. Like I drove over here at 80 mile an hour from Minden to here. So it took us 45 minutes. The speed limit was 70, but the cop won't touch you until you're doing maybe 100. There's no, you're not being policed all the time. You're not looking over your shoulder. And if they do pull you over, and they just say, don't do that again. It's okay, thank you. I've been pulled over twice here in 6 years. One, I crossed the double yellow line, and he just, and I said, oh, well, the guy was going really slow. He said, I can see that. It's okay, but just don't do it again. That's righto.
Yeah.
And they just let you go. They're decent. They're not there to hit you with a billy club so much.
There's two type of people seem to be leaving Australia right now. We're losing a lot of good kids because they've worked out that they can go and live in Southeast Asia or travel around and live a lot cheaper and work remotely. There's also, I saw a statistic, 185,000 Australian millionaires leaving Australia this year because taxation-wise they're being destroyed back home. So people are leaving for freedom, more flexibility in their work and cost of living, and also they're trying to protect their assets and wealth.
Exactly. Some very good friends of ours. They've been here. They just went home yesterday. They were here. They've bought themselves a truck. He has a very, very successful painting business in Brisbane, but he can't run it anymore. And they have decided to sell their home. And he and his wife and their little boy, they're all moving here to America, and they're only some of the people that we know of, because I get, when I do those posts on Facebook and stuff, how do we move over there? And I said, well, get on a jet and fly over here. You do have to have a business, so he's going to open up his painting and decorating business over here.
He'll probably do well.
Yeah, he'll kill it, and he'll get to keep most of what he earns, which is, really that's what we want. We'll work hard, or we'll all work hard, so long as we get to keep what what we've earned, and yes, pay our share for taxes, which is for the defence of Australia and roads and garbage, but not all of it. They take too much, but then that's what communist countries do. Socialist countries are going to take more and more and more, and when you think it's bad enough, it's going to get a lot worse.
Well, I didn't know this about you, and we spoke about this on the way in, but you are a Defence Force veteran. You did 3 years in the Army with your brother as well.
Well, I was a Choco, CMF.
Yep.
Yeah. But never went to war.
No, still served your country though. Still put the uniform on, and you should always be proud of that. But I imagine your dad was probably World War II veteran. Family members were.
Yeah.
You probably had a granddad who went to World War I, or great uncles, I imagine.
I'm not sure about one of the granddads did. Yeah, Dad was in the Second World War. He was a captain, but one of the grandfathers was in the First.
Yeah. What do you reckon they think about the Australia that they see today?
Yeah, they'd cry. Those men who died, and women in trenches in Flanders Field and the Somme and places like that, they gave their blood to keep our country free. And then, Korea, we fought the communists there, and we fought the communists in Southeast Asia. And now they're pretty much taking over our country. Who would have thought in the First World War, Second World War, that you'd have a socialist government like Mr. Albanese, and his government. Progressive. Exactly, but they would have been rolling in their graves. They'd be terribly sad to see it, because my great grandfather, great grandfather, they were pioneers out in the bush, out north and west of Townsville, the Charters Towers and all that area.
Yep.
And they raised cattle and worked hard, and they'd be the enemy now, because any primary producer is pretty much the enemy of the state.
Yeah. Anyone who's entrepreneurial is pretty much.
Well, you're right.
State, no?
What you do,
they've wiped out they're trying to destroy our industry.
They will.
There's no doubt about it.
And they'll keep on adding more and more layers of compliance.
Yeah.
And then they'll send people out with their clipboards and find that you're not complying here, and so we'll fine you for that, or we'll shut this down, and eventually you'll say, I've had enough of this. Time to get out.
You're living an interesting life and best life over here. I really appreciate you taking your time to catch up with me and giving me some insight. What's one message that you would leave for young Australians that are watching this? Because it's predominantly a younger audience watching this now. What do you think they can do to help take back their country, mate?
It's a hard one. Unfortunately, I think a lot of them have been indoctrinated through school, university and the media. They're being told, what these people want them to believe. Don't believe it. Believe in Australia, and that is not a socialist Australia. An Australia for Australians. It's a great country. It should be a great country again. There's a fairly good battle now, but definitely get behind groups like yours, like One Nation, those sort of people, and vote. If you're 18 or older, you've got to go out there and vote, because staying at home is not going to get it done.
Reading some books?
Yeah, well, reading books, your education doesn't come from university and the school. It comes from what you research, like reading Solzhenitsyn or Ayn Rand and, George Orwell and things. Get to see where you're heading, and if you find you're heading in the wrong direction, which Australia is, you have to now turn it around. But you only get that through research, and you have to do your own research.
Yeah.
You're never going to get it from the university professor. He's going to tell you what he believes, and which is a good socialist, or your school teacher, and you're definitely never going to get it from the mainstream media. You'll get it from your media, you telling them, telling people what you see Australia, where you see Australia. Myself, I'll keep posting, and
unbelievable. You got over 120,000 followers on Facebook. You're bashing away on that. You've come back online again, which is fantastic. I think you've got a really important message to keep pushing out there, and I encourage you to do it.
I'll continue to do it. My daughter and my wife will make sure that I do.
Yeah,
I can't bail on it.
Mate, former Senator Fraser Anning, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
You're welcome.
Good on you,
mate. It was great to meet you in person. I've seen you on the TV, and I love it.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. See you later.